Okay, now let us go to James-Delingpole. And, of course, Mr. Delingpole is a writer for many international publications, like The Telegraph, The Spectator. He is a best-selling author. Welcome to Obamaland. I have seen your future, and it doesn't work. He writes for The Times, The Daily Telegraph, The Spectator, Libertarian Conservative, and his website's james-delingpole.com, and he is a climate denier. James, first question. We've seen countless BBC, London Guardian, London Independent articles saying we've got to get violent against climate deniers. We need authoritarian systems. If the public's too dumb to accept carbon feudalism, we need to start using, a green tyranny for at least the next 30 years to get it in place. The father of the Gaia movement. And now we've got their acolytes, their cult members taking over buildings with weapons, calling babies degenerate, filthy parasites. We've got parents firing bullets into babies' chest, murdering themselves, all for Al Gore, saying, I'm doing it for you, Al, while he's running around, reportedly, with his proboscis swinging between his legs, humping on women in hotel rooms worldwide and buying giant houses and eating giant T-bone carbon-filled steaks. So you've got the floor. These people are panicking. They're starting to get violent.
Yeah, but Alex, you know what? I wish I could share your optimism about having destroyed the Death Star and being about to turn the Imperial fleet into toast. I think this war is only just beginning. And the reason it's only just beginning is because of the scale of the opposition we're up against. We're up against the United Nations. We're up against the Rockefeller-Foundation. We're up against Bill and Melinda Gates. We're up against George Soros. We're up against the European Union. We're up against the governments of most of the Western world, led by the Obama administration, and you've got the Environmental Protection Agency and so on. It is going to be a very tough struggle to make our case that what these people are trying to do is create a new world order under the auspices of environmentalism. But this is what's happening. It's what's been happening for a very long time. Now, I've just written a piece about the James Lee atrocity, or attempted atrocity, rather. Thank God it wasn't. I think, thank God only the bad guy got shot in the end. And what I've said, I gave it the headline, James Lee is Al Gore, is Prince Charles, is the Unabomber. Because whether it takes the form of violent terrorists like James Lee and the Unabomber, or whether it takes the form of people like Al Gore talking about, there must be limits to growth, it's all a manifestation of the same problem. These people essentially hate the human species. They think that population should be reduced. They think that experts, unelected experts over whom we have no control, should be put in charge of the world and be allowed to allocate what they call scarce resources. This is a very scary problem. It's not going to go away. And another problem, which I think is not discussed often enough, is the fact that the rubbish that our children are taught in schools. Your kids, my kids, are taught the same...
Oh, it's 24/7 brainwashing. In the New York Times, they say it's good that the 7-year-old comes home and writes fictitious school-issued tickets to mommy about taking a hot bath, and now Prince Charles is out saying, make it illegal to take a hot bath and make people wear clothes that have detergents in them so that you're not allowed to wash your clothes. Yeah. I mean, while he's flying around on jets and owns his own private train.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I went to see my daughter sing in a singing concert the other day, and one of the two songs she sang was one called When Will We Learn? And it was all about how we humans, we destroy the environment, and when will we learn to care more for the world? This is eco-propaganda. It's not a sweet song for kids to sing. This is teaching children that humans are bad, that economic growth is bad, that we are evil. Now, this sort of stuff is going to create exactly the kind of mindset that we saw in James Lee. I reckon that we are creating hundreds, if not thousands, of future James Lees by teaching them this nonsense.
Well, James, I've seen the graphs since the eco-education in the 90s and the death education. They say don't commit suicide. It's quite easy. You take your shoelaces, tie it around your neck, and hang it on anything, and the little girls go and commit suicide. They teach them, you're killing the earth, you're bad. And in many cases, it comes out, the little girls especially, Because they show them images of baby animals with their heads cut off. They actually do this, folks, especially in Australia. Then the little 12-year-olds go and kill themselves. And we wonder why children committing suicide is off the charts. They're telling them, you're scum, you're bad, you know, one-child policies, humans are parasites, we must, you know, be eradicated. And James, when I was in college, it didn't matter what class I was in. That's all they would... I mean, it could be a math class, and they would stop once a week and say, you know, there's too many people. You know, we've got to reduce them. I mean, this is their cult. And I agree with you that they're well entrenched. It's their entire agenda of the collectivists. They're not going away. They cold-bloodedly know it's about neo-serfdom and feudalism, not about the earth. But the issue is, when I say we've blown up their Death Star, the tide has turned. People now know what this is, and it is a long war, but... They're looking and acting scared, is my point.
I agree with that. I agree with that totally. The problem is that they are a very shifty, cunning opposition. And you notice how, as the whole global warming thing is dying, now that, you know, the IPCC has been exposed as a bunch of charlatans lying, distorting the data and so on, what's happening now is that they're shifting their ground, so that now they're talking about this thing called biodiversity. You know, hey, forget all that stuff we were telling you about global warming. You know, forget we said that. Now we've got to have the UN stepping in and businesses being controlled and fishermen not being allowed to fish and so on because of biodiversity. You know, in England the other day we had this extraordinary story about something like $250,000 being spent to build this bridge over a road so that dormice could climb over from one side of the road to the other. You know, $250,000 spent on dormice that probably aren't even going to use this bridge. This is the new green movement in action, and they are never going to give up. They are always going to find new ways of imposing their taxation, their control on us free people. I mean, ultimately, as you know and I know, Alex, this comes down to liberty. It's a question of who should decide our lives. Should it be unelected bureaucrats, or should it be us?
Well, that's what this is really about, is social engineering, and they are the saviors of the earth. And you see the entire economy in Europe, England, the United States, the entire Western world, where you can only get scholarships to be one of these environmental engineers or assessors. So they're changing the entire infrastructure where only when the new priesthood gives the nod can you build a shed or a house, what type of architecture you can have. Germany saying no single-family dwellings because the family's bad by 2020. Yeah. It is a total surveillance tyranny where the new environmental cult rules everything, but then separately, whenever the select global corporations that are globalists are involved, they're given waivers for everything.
Well, if you ask most people, ask the person in the street what Agenda 21 was, most of them would not know what you were talking about. And yet, Agenda 21 of the United Nations is probably the single most dangerous piece of legislation in the world today. Because what it does is it gives the United Nations, all these bureaucrats over whom we have no control, it gives them the right to decide how we live our lives, how we heat our homes, how much tax we pay, how much we pay for our energy bills. And, of course, one of the horrors about Agenda 21 is it has been able to filter down through even to sort of local town councils. You know, they're all signing up to this deal where, yes, we too will commit our local population, whether they like it or not, to reducing their carbon emissions and you know the way that they with the cars they drive, how much we tax their cars, you know, for parking and things.
Well, that's what Schwarzenegger said at the end of the Copenhagen meeting. As you know, he said, we're going to go back and get the governors and the cities, and we're going to do it. And Austin, just 2 months ago, passed a $2.6 billion tax over the next 3 years on gas and electricity. And so, again, it never has anything to do with even the environmental crisis. It's, you will give our local environmental mafia contractor $1 million to build a thing for mice or for turtles, or you will, give $200,000 to them, or you will now pay more to some multinational corporation. That's why the big mega corporations have financed this, and that's their Achilles heel. If we attack these fraudsters through, you're a bunch of idiot environmental cultists, they'll win. But if we point out they're bankrolled by the Rockefeller-Foundation, by the ultra-rich, to create a global monopoly, then we can defeat them.
Yes, well, I mean, it's good that the market has helped destroy their carbon fraud. I mean, it's fantastic that the price of CO2 on the Chicago Carbon Exchange fell from $7 a ton to 10 cents a ton. And the Chicago Climate Exchange, which of course was founded by Al Gore and Goldman Sachs, among others, has essentially collapsed. That's the good news. The bad news, of course, is that by the time it did collapse, Al Gore had made his money and sold out to somebody else. This is the problem. Al Gore and his cronies are parasites. They are leeching off the backs of ordinary people and pretending to be caring, holier than thou, the people that we should look up to. You're absolutely right. I mean, the slobbering sex poodle, as I think he was called in those in the police reports by that poor woman, the masseurs that he tried to get his...
Well, now there's a bunch of women. Reportedly, this is what he does.
Oh, really? So he is the Tiger Woods of the environmental movement.
Yeah, but at least Tiger was paying them and they were willing. They were actually whores. Yeah. With Gore, it appears, like a lot of psychopaths, he likes to get some older woman in there and then freak them out.
Here we go again. James Lee equals Al Gore equals the Unabomber. There is not a cigarette papers. I think it's an interesting fact that so many of the people who parade their green virtuousness are, in their private lives, slightly despicable, cruddy people. There was a famous experiment, I don't know whether you remember, conducted by some Canadian academics, where they tested these students, and some of them had bought green products, and some of them hadn't bought green products in a supermarket. And the ones that had bought green products were more likely to lie and cheat and steal than the ones who hadn't bought the green products, because the green products gave them a sense of virtuousness.
They were 6 times more likely to steal, and if I remember, it was all over the Canadian papers a few months ago, that these were actually greenies that did the study. They thought it was going to show the opposite, to morally make everyone look bad and say, see, greenies are more moral, but the truth is they're a bunch of knuckle-dragging control freaks.
Yes, exactly. It was very, very satisfying. I mean, one thing we have got, Alex, the facts are on our side. The world, Malthus was proved wrong. Paul Ehrlich was proved wrong. The Green Revolution in the 1970s meant that Paul Ehrlich's predictions that mankind was doomed due to overpopulation, it didn't come true.
Yeah, he said by 2000. He said from an ice age. So did John P. Holdren. But they don't care how many times they're wrong. They just reinvent some new crisis, which they're going to save us from if we just give them trillions in money.
Yep, that's absolutely it. It's a sort of global elite who are trying to keep the money for themselves and trying even to decide, population levels. It's deeply sinister, and it's amazing how few people are aware of the connections. All these people are in it together.
Well, I mean, you talk about Malthus. He was disproven when he said in 1750 something that Britain would totally collapse within 50 years. Total opposite. He said the Earth can only sustain a few more million people. Stay with us.